Good morning, everybody. My name's Bill Michael, and it's my privilege to be the Executive Director of Chicago Arts and the Logan Center for the Arts. And I want to thank you all so much for joining us on this gorgeous day to celebrate this incredible woman. This is the third day of what has really been a really exciting opportunity for us at the university to partner with the DuSable Museum, the Poetry Foundation, and colleagues across the university to bring together an incredible group of poets, artists, scholars, many individuals who are all three of those things, to talk about and learn about and share stories about Gwendolyn Brooks. And we're so thrilled that you've joined us this morning. All of this is very much a part of an incredible, over a year-long commemoration of the 100th anniversary of Miss Brooks' birth, and we're thrilled to be partnering with both Brooks Permissions and our Miss Brooks 100 on this event and so many others to help celebrate and mark this incredible moment, a few of which are on the back of your program. So we hope you'll come back often, though I will admit one of the great things about events like this is yesterday someone came up to me and asked me if they could add another event later in June. So there'll be more to come, so you should check out the website. As I said in this room last night, we were really fortunate, almost simultaneously, an incredible group of faculty colleagues led by John Wilkinson in creative writing and Ken Warren approached us and others at the University of New Chicago Arts about the possibility of holding this conference about the same time that Quraish Lansana, who is a terrific member of our community, a spectacular scholar, poet, and artist, and a really important partner of the Logan Center in helping make sure that the Logan Center really does meet its goal of celebrating and being an important part of this community on the South Side. And when we opened 5 years ago, besides being a really important space for our students and faculty to celebrate creativity and to create and learn, it was also very important to us that we recognize that we are coming into an incredible community which has been rich in arts and culture for a long time. And since we opened our doors, we have focused on highlighting various aspects of the Black arts movement. In our first year, we focused on AfriCobra. We also happened to open about the 50th anniversary of many of these things. We didn't time it that way, but it was a great fortuitous opportunity. The AACM, last year, the incomparable Val Gray Ward, who started many important theater movements in the Black arts movement. And now we are thrilled to be continuing that tradition by joining with so many to celebrate the wonderful Miss Brooks. And so I want to thank Quraish for his vision and for his real passion in not only making sure that so many of us on the South Side came together to mark this really important moment, but that in fact it took place throughout this city, throughout this state, and in fact throughout the nation. And knowing Q, it'll be throughout the world before it's all over. Please join me in welcoming Quraish Lansana. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out to celebrate and support and study and contemplate all that Miss Brooks brought and continues to bring to the city and the nation and the country. I will preface this day by saying this is a really wonderful day of programming with some amazing writers and scholars. And I hope that you stay with us all day. And then, of course, this evening, and then there's Sherry reading this evening, which is amazing and star-studded. Downstairs in the performance hall, young superstar Jamila Woods and her band, and Jamila herself comes from the poetry community, is a poet herself. Nicole Mitchell, Chicago's own Nicole Mitchell, considered the #1 jazz flautist in the world, and her band, the Black Earth Ensemble, will be accompanied by 4 poets, C.M. Burroughs, Roger Reeves, Christiana Ray Colon, and Avery R. Young. And Nikki has created original compositions to 8 of Miss Brooks's poems. And so that will close out this amazing 2.5 days of celebration of Miss Brooks. We are here to discuss In the Mecca, which I think is one of Miss Brooks's most important and necessary poems. And I want to thank my friend Tim Samuelson, who is the historian of the city of Chicago, for sharing this slide presentation with us that I will share with you. So the Mecca building itself, that's actually where she went to school, which was Woodrow Wilson, now Kennedy King. This is the Mecca as we knew it, and its original state at 34th and State. It was built for the World Columbian Exposition in the 1890s, and by the early 1900s into 1930, the white folks moved out, the rich white and black folks moved in, and it started to become something other than a showcase of Mies van der Rohe's work. It started to become what we might consider an early project, like the predecessor to the tenement. And so here's what it looked like, very dark. Miss Brooks even writes about this, very dark when you enter the Mecca building, and then you have this atrium of light, right? And the Mecca building was a few blocks, a few blocks long, a few blocks wide. And if you think about that, all of those floors were apartments, right? But you walk in, sort of an internal courtyard, right? You walk in, and then all of those were apartments on 3 levels. Get that? So you have this light coming in from the atrium roof, and then the shadow, and then door to door to door to door. Miss Brooks, when she worked there for this man, Reverend Dr. E.N. French, a spiritual advisor and bishop. It was hard to find work in the Depression, and she was able to get a job, first as a secretary working for Dr. E.N. French, and then Dr. French, realizing her talents as writer, he asked her to join him on Sundays to preach. And she didn't really want to do that. He told her that if you don't come to church on Sunday, if you don't come and preach on Sunday, you won't have a job on Monday. She didn't come on Sunday. She went on Monday, and he fired her. But take a look at this language from this ad from the Defender. Many people believe spiritual help is business, work, games, love, marriage, domestic affairs, etc. If you believe, you may be benefited. Also in your undertakings, we are here to help you. Send $1. Send $1 for our spiritual advice and other things. And if you will use them according to instruction, you may be helped to get your desires. The Zion Holy Spiritual Missions Lab. And then look at that on the side. Stop worrying. When in doubt, consult me first. Avoid serious mistakes before it's too late. And another view interior of the Mecca building, and some of its inhabitants, and some interior views of some of those apartments, right? And the apartments were, by 1930, they had been cut in half, so they were even smaller spaces than they were originally, right? It was a wonder of modern architecture with large apartments, and then the Depression came. And so there were often 7 people in an apartment. And so what Miss Brooks did before she left working for Dr. French, right, is he created love balls and thunderbolts, which she references in the poem, to help heal people spiritually. And Miss Brooks delivered these potions, these cures, if you will, throughout the Mecca, going door to door. And one of the things that Tim likes to say, and I believe in this, is that her going and knocking door to door to deliver these items informed how she saw, informed her powers of observation, and thinking about the poem, which our poets and scholars will break down momentarily. Think about that she delivered these things. That's part of her job, door to door. How many doors a day? Who knows? Knocking on doors and experiencing what was on the other side. What kind of life? Who was on the other side of those doors? And how that informed her powers of observation, as well as this idea of being inclusive, of community, right? Which in the Mecca very much was. The Mecca was very much a community. The Chicago Defender, as many papers did, and may perhaps still do, if you wrote an ad and paid for it, they would actually run or publish that as an article. So this is an ad from Dr. French, but it appears as news. Maybe it's a precursor to fake news or alternative facts. And I know that print is very, very small, but it's essentially a breakdown of the mission of Dr. French and his practice, right? Doesn't believe in or practice clairvoyancy. We do not believe in, second paragraph, we do not believe in messages from our dead relatives. Probably better to read it from there. We do not believe in receiving messages from our dead relatives, nor do we believe in practice or teach voodooism. But all of our spiritual advice is based upon the teachings of Christ Jesus and his Father, Jehovah God. Through the efforts of its members, the mission has helped greatly to give and aid and employment to many young girls who in turn helping fathers, mothers, and other poor, misfortunate, needy ones, and hundreds of others who have followed our spiritual advice. This has brought sunshine and gladness into the hearts of many during the past 2 years. This is the joint purpose of the Zion Holy Spiritual Mission, to help mankind physically, mentally, and spiritually so that they will be true Christians through the teachings of the mission, which are based on the Bible, and hence they will be better citizens in the community in which they live. Powerful stuff, right? Pretty persuasive. Pulitzer Prize-winning poet Yusuf Komayaka, in his collection Blue Notes, Essays, Interviews, and Commentaries, contains an interview he conducted with writer Tom Johnson. The interview, titled Yusuf Komayaka on Etheridge Night, explores the two significant poets' relationship and shared connections to the blues, jazz, and Southern traditions. It is common knowledge in Black literary history that Knight and Mrs. Brooks corresponded regularly when he was incarcerated in the Indiana State Prison. Knight sent her poems, and Miss Brooks wrote thoughtful and critical responses. Their bond grew to the point that Miss Brooks was invited to read with Knight at the prison. The recording is remarkable. Miss Brooks also helped him secure a book deal with another of Knight's great influences, Dudley Randall, Broadside Press. Later in the interview, in reference to the Knight's aesthetic relationship with the Black arts movement, Komayaka states, I think with the Black arts movement, Etheridge was really on the sidelines of that movement. His poems are a lot more grounded than the voices coming out of the Black arts movement. Etheridge is not reactionary in his poems. He is confrontational, and he is also seeking a level of truth that pretty much defines the essence of him, an individual, an artist. Same as blues singer would, same as Robert Johnson would. Coming to his own voice and technique, and yet knowing the overall tradition. I think he knew the blues tradition, the Black folk tradition, but also the European tradition, probably through reading in prison. Moreover, he was also closely respected by people such as Gwendolyn Brooks, who had also come through that tradition. As a matter of fact, and this is Komayaka, as a matter of fact, I think when Gwendolyn Brooks aligns herself with the Black arts movement, her poetry loses a fundamental ground, except the book Into the Mecca. The correct title of the book references In the Mecca, as we all know, Ms. Brooks's book-length poem. The poem functions as an incredibly vivid and imaginative vehicle for political and cultural shift from integrationist principles to Black nationalism. Though it is unclear to which specific tradition Knight and Brooks share in the quote above, as several are mentioned, what is crystal is Komayaka's opinion. The interviewer proffers a follow-up question. So, you think in a way she maybe ideologically wanted to embrace something that wasn't so much of herself as her earlier poetry? Komayaka responds, I think so. But again, she is reaching out for a community, reaching out to those individuals who would have denied her existence unless she co-opted herself. At the beginning of this Centennial celebration, we brought in the 5 Black Pulitzer winners in poetry, given another opportunity for Komayaka, whom I have a great deal of respect, but giving Yusuf another opportunity to speak on this matter. And he stood his ground, and he essentially said in front of 750 people in Chicago, in Miss Brooks' hometown, he said, she created a service literature. Her work lost a fundamental ground for a love from Black people. From that moment, we jump into what our panelists have to say. I believe that In the Mecca is significant in so many, many, many ways. But I'm going to stop there and bring up Major Jackson, Dr. Cheryl Clark, Adrian Matika, and Dr. Light Ray. Come on up. And you can decide if you want to take the podium or when you present, or if you want to do it from, you want to sit.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being up so early. Thanks to all of the organizers of this wonderful event. So I'll just, as they said yesterday morning, dive right in. Not the pet bird of poets, the sweetest sonnet. Dream makes a giddy sound, not strong like rent, feeding a wife, satisfying a man. I say it's fine, honest I do. And I'd like to be a bad woman too, and wear the brave stockings of night black lace and strut down the streets with paint on my face. Us other guys don't think he's such a much. His voice is shrill, his muscle pitiful. My dreams, my works must wait till after hell. From early on, Brooks challenged even the African American metaphor of the dream. She takes it out of the deferred status and says, what? It's not like rent, not like feeding a wife, not like satisfying a man. From early on, she challenged black respectability, masculinity, and gave us so many portraits of black people, black urban people. In 1981, I was to meet Gwendolyn Brooks for the first time in person. I had read her poetry as an undergraduate during the late 60s in Arthur P. Davis's Negro Literature in the U.S. That's specific, isn't it? Which spanned from Lucy Terry to Leroy Jones and Ted Jones, of whom Professor Davis admitted he did not understand a word of what those boys were trying to say. This was summer 1967. I don't need to enumerate the tragedies by that time we had all experienced. Brooks was 50 years old. Now we are celebrating her centennial. I did not begin to work seriously on Brooks till 25 years after 1967, at almost the age of 50 myself. At the age of 51, Brooks was about to publish in the Mecca, which declaims her intention to strike outside the cultural confines and constraints of Western formalism and Western publishing institutions. She did continue, however, to deploy her enviable lyric techniques, her enviable prosody, and turns of phrase, and her brilliant sense of humor larded with subtle sarcasm. Like the following: old women should not seek to be perfumed, said Plutarch, but Dill, the kind of woman you peek at in passing and thank your God or zodiac you may never have to know, puts on Taboo. Some of us remember Taboo. Back to 1981. At that time, I was a student life programmer at Rutgers College, a formerly all-male institution until 1972, alma mater of Paul Leroy Robeson, and still predominantly white. I was advising student organizations which had the lion's share of student fee money at Rutgers. These white student-led organizations were under tremendous pressure to diversify their programming across the board, from lectures to major concerts. In those days, diversify meant add more black people or black culture. My colleague, a young, progressive white woman with a great sense of humor, asked my advice about inviting Gwendolyn Brooks. I championed the idea, though I hadn't read her work since A Broadside Treasury, if you remember that. She edited that, and it presented most of the black arts poets. She herself had 2 poems in it, To Young Africans and The Life of Lincoln West, I think. To Young Africans, I always say, was her attempt to show the black arts poets that, she could, really handle writing about blackness. So we prepared for the advent of Miss Brooks. Our collaborations with other departments resulted in a standing room only event, 600 people. I had never heard Miss Brooks read before, and hearing her was quite an experience. I remember she read The Mother, which she said, everyone calls this my abortion poem. Believed that even in my deliberateness, I was not deliberate. She also read The Life of Lincoln West, ugliest little boy that everyone ever saw. That is what everyone said. She read vigorously for a full hour. And remember, I said there were close to 600 people in attendance. Many people, students and others, wanted to speak to her afterwards. The line of people wrapped around the room. She received everyone who wanted to speak with her. Several times we had to move individuals along. I smoked cigarettes then, so I was able to, sneak out and smoke a lot of cigarettes that night. But she received everybody. Early Brooks' work portrays the social scientists. The we is they. Portrays the social scientists so prevalent here in Chicago, the town that created sociology. It was created right here, wasn't it? University of Chicago. Okay. She always schooled herself, which Brooks's ethnographic deployments allow for a clarity of race, gender, class analysis. She always schooled herself, which is what she was also doing in the Mecca, her final seminar on the West, a gray, hideous space, according to Leroy Jones in his poem Black Dada Nihilismus. I still find in the Mecca an epic lesson on the spiritual and psychic condition of urban black people in post-modernity, lying in the shadows of modernity and the great migrations, the Holocaust, and social forces of the 60s. Only someone who had been writing poetry since childhood could know its deep resources, as well as the deep resources of the English language. At first, I was going to do my entire dissertation on Brooks, but decided I preferred to see her in community with other women poets. And when I told one very well-respected scholar of contemporary women's poetry and a poet herself that I wanted to work on poetry, she suggested I work on Gertrude Stein. That's because I'm a lesbian. That's what, And I said, why no? I want to work on Gwendolyn Brooks. She conceded, well, she's certainly a major poet. In the Mecca, with his male-centered dedications to the memory of Langston Hughes and to James Baldwin, Amiri Baraka, and Mike Alexandrov, educators extraordinaire, unquote, reflects upon 20th century modernism and forecasts the literary innovations of the Black arts movement. Don Lee wants not a various America. Don Lee wants a new nation under nothing, stands out in the auspices of fire, wants new art and anthem, will want a new music screaming in the sun. We want to say Brooks turned to radicalism within the Mecca and turned away from, quote, Shakespeare, Joyce, or James, or Horace, Huxley, Hemingway, unquote. Should we see the raised Mecca building as signifying our current corrupt oligarchic state in the U.S. and the worlds of Meccans as a metonymic statement of the disparate voices of the still racial and racialized America? From Mrs. Sally to Weslin, the Wandering Woman, and Insane Sophie, Brooks presents readers with a dystopic world that makes invisible and kills its own children, and her critical and critiquing eye on her people, the Meccans. Or an extended elegy and extraordinary epic in memory of 22 years of adapting lyric formalism and modernism to Black life. Eve Dunbar, in her recent piece, quote, on Gwendolyn Brooks and disappearing Black girls, calls upon us to read the poem as a haunted query. Quote, snatched, murdered, runaway. The truth of the matter is all of these titles attempt to name the reality that Black girls are and have been disappeared in this nation. Every day in all sorts of ways that never make headlines. Gwendolyn Brooks knew that Black girls are among the most undervalued, exploited, and unprotected members of American society in 1968 when she published her long poem, In the Mecca. In the Mecca is not, she continues, In the Mecca is not a pretty poem in that it's not a poem one wants to like. It's a poem that speaks to what it might mean to answer its narrator's other repeated and haunted query. How many care, Pepita? The poems of After Mecca, the second part of In the Mecca, seem to cede the public to Black men. For example, poems Boy Breaking Glass, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, all three poems dedicated to men, Mark Crawford, Charles Evers, Dudley Randall. The Black Stone Rangers, Jeff, Jean, Geronimo, and Bop. The two sermons, one opening with an epigraph attributed to influential and cultural nationalist Ron Karenga, and the other dedicated to Chicago activist Walter Bradford, which closed the volume. Exhort the imagined community to, quote, turn the river to prepare for the coming hell and health together, to meet the brash and terrible weather with life, love, and to live and go out to find and medicate the whirlwind. While the leadership in the whirlwind is male proletariat, quote, a garbage man is dignified as any diplomat. Women like Big Bessie do their work at the margins. In the wild weed. In the wild weed, she is a citizen and is a moment of highest quality admirable. Big Bessie, whose feet hurt like nobody's business, is a subversive antidote to the martyred Pepita, the gang girl Mary Ann, a rose in a whiskey glass, the powerless Mrs. Sally, the impoverished merdis of winter squirrel, and reminds those in leadership of their responsibility to changing the lives of those, like Black women, who occupy the margins. Thank you.
So we just switched up stuff just a little bit because Dr. Clark, first of all, that was incredible. And second of all, she just said everything I was going to try to say, but like way better. It's like so much more articulate. Because I wanted to talk about Miss Sally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this just a little bit. So give me a second. Hey, peace, everybody. It's so good to be here with these incredible scholars talking about Ms. Brooks' work, which has been so important to me and to the writing that I've tried to do. I'm going to switch this just a little bit and shift, and I'm going to talk about the poem Malcolm X, which is an after the Mecca. Hopefully this will work and not be embarrassing too. All right, Malcolm X, and it's dedicated to Dudley Randall. Original, ragged, round, rich, robust, he had the hawkman's eyes. We gasped, we saw the maleness raking out and making guttural the air and pushing us to walls. And in the soft and fundamental hour, a sorcery devout and vertical beguiled the world. He opened us, who was a key, who was a man. I started thinking about that poem when you were talking about how masculine the dedications become in the second part of In the Mecca. So I'm going to change the title of what I was going to read. So now it's called He Had the Hawk Eyes, Commemoration and Elegy in the Mecca, the book, not the poem. One of Gwendolyn Brooks' great gifts was being a seer of people. By that I mean she cataloged and immortalized a kind of Black experience that was willfully ignored by the early 20th century writers other than maybe Zornell Hurston and Langston Hughes and a few others. And she did so with a power and a grace and characterization that hardly any writers of any genre can match. The tapestries of detail that come together as characters in some of her early works, especially The Street in Bronzeville and Annie Allen, are templates for the character-driven poetry that followed. It's that sociology you were talking about, Dr. Clark, the seeing people for who they are. In a self-interview for Tri-Quarterly in 1984, Ms. Brooks said, "A poet is one who distills experience, strains experience. A poet looks, sees. Poets oblige themselves to see." Which is why the sociological and cultural work that happened in the poems around her characters is equally important to acknowledge. No matter what political confluences helped propel Ms. Brooks' work forward, she never stopped seeing people and systems of community and systems of oppression, all of which are the center of her work for me. She was able to be an observer while remaining a seer, to be a griot while remaining a poet with a capital P through some of the most combustible times in American history. What I'd like to talk about, though, is the way that characterization changed between her early work and In the Mecca, the book, including the poem. And I'd like to talk a little bit about how these changes were informed both by her shifting politics and by her shifting ear. The music in her poems in and after In the Mecca is significantly political, more political in its craft, and by that I mean non-metrical and unformal as opposed to informal. And while the objects of the characterization moved from the mundane, as in local and community-driven, to more publicly cultural figures like Emmett Till and Malcolm X. Which makes sense because the zeitgeist during the civil rights, Black Power movement, and Black arts movements necessitated a different kind of characterization of minds and the bodies in the streets. One that moved away from depictions of interpersonal and economic struggle as evidence of value and into elegy or maybe eulogy as one Black figure after another was martyred. Because my time on the mic here is limited and I'm trying to do some of this on the fly, I'm going to read 3 very short excerpts from poems that show the shifting characterizations and depictions of humanity that I'm talking about in action. You can see it through the imagery that she uses, but also through the evolving craft choices. And then I'll briefly talk a little bit more about In the Mecca as a natural evolution of Ms. Brooks' historicizing of Black life at a time when there weren't very many public representations of it, and certainly the ones that were good were rare. So the elegies I'm going to read are going to be a memorial to Ed Bland. I'm only reading parts of this. Memorial to Ed Bland from Annie Allen, the last quatrain of the Ballad of Emmett Till from the Bean Eaters, and then I'll read Malcolm X, or just an excerpt of it. Memorial to Ed Bland. He grew up being curious and thinking things are various. Nothing was merely deleterious or spurious. So you notice the polysyllabic and mostly perfect rhyme, and there's very little visual representation yet, but it happens a little bit later in the poem. The last quatrain of the Ballad of Emmett Till, and I'm just going to read the whole poem because it's very short. Emmett's mother is a pretty-faced thing, the tint of pulled taffy. She sits in a red room, drinking black coffee. She kisses her killed boy, and she is sorry. Chaos and windy grays through a red prairie. It's a really pretty poem. Now, the people in this poem are more public, right? We know who Emmett Till is, and we know who his mother is, and they're more national, and the language has changed. If you notice, there's imperfect in rhyme. If you could hear that. You can't see this. The lines have a varied shape, and they're varied metrically. And then all of a sudden, there's this emphasis on colors and image, right? Chaos in the windy grays through a red prairie. All right, and then lastly, I'll just read a little bit of Malcolm X again so you remember where we started. Original, ragged, round, rich, robust, he had the hawkman's eyes. We gasped. We saw the maleness raking out and making guttural the air and pushing us to walls. So there's no more rhyme now, right? There's lots of alliteration and assonance, and there's some repetition, and that's how the music gets made later on. There's no more meter either, and you can't see this, but the lines are really jagged. They change, like original is a line by itself. Because we're talking about Malcolm X, original, period. Right? That could have been the whole poem right there. Think about it, you know? But we also get more 3D characterizations. So it's physical, it's political, and metaphorical all at once in those small spaces. The poem itself also illustrates the publicness of Malcolm X from its point of view. Right? Every observation in that poem, as opposed to the other, is we instead of I. So in each of these examples, and they're incomplete, of course. I didn't read the whole poem. Ms. Brooks approaches elegy and commemoration in a different way, and that lines up nicely with the evolving politics of her work. Memorial to Ed Bland is traditional, and it remembers the object with a consistent rhyme scheme. And the last quatrain of the Ballad of Emmett Till, the elegy, is for both mother and son. And the grief is displayed in the scattered rhyme schemes and staggered stanzaic patterns. It's a communal elegy in direction, but not point of view. And then finally, in Malcolm X, sound and form and intention come together in a very modern elegant tradition, one that where the language used to describe the departed is almost onomatopoeic. So the sounds represent greatly the memory of Malcolm X. There's also assonance and consonance now too, and I'm geeking out on the music language like Major's gonna. There's assonance and consonance, which has a kind of power, creates character in a very different way than just a gentle description. It embodies the vanguard figure of Malcolm X. Malcolm X is only one of the examples of the shift in point of view and the sounds in this version of In Memoriam she's doing. And there are many more in this book and in the Mecca. The Sermons on the Warped Land would count for that in ways. Medgar Evers certainly does, and even the Blackstone Rangers, I think, could fit into that conversation. The book even begins with a long goodbye, right? In the Mecca, the poem itself is it subjectively operates in an observational and documentary mode, like Bean Eaters or Street in Bronzeville, but it has characterizations that pop in a different way with assonance and repetition and consonants. It sounds more like, like Miles, or like Coltrane after he played with Miles, right? He had his moment and then he figured out where he needed to go next, This is a revolutionary time she's writing into and figuring her way around. It's a time of new protests that they're incited against old wrongs that seem to never go away, right? It's a time of new ideas and representations of black life, and I think that In the Mecca does all of that for us at once. Thank you.
Good morning. You have a round table full of poets that we're all going to geek out on the music in this particular poem. So what I have to say is going to sound like I'm accenting and italicizing and underlining what's already been said. And thank you for organizing this. Wednesday, April 5th, 2017, 12:57 p.m., Major Jackson wrote, "Dear Quraysh, I will make general remarks about Brooks's evolutionary yet consistent relationship to language and sound, particularly as a stylized portrait/imprint of herself as she adapts and grows even more into her brand of political consciousness. I will not talk long, but point to several passages in the book. Yours, Major J. Picking up on, you have that. I too picked up on the ethnographic elements in the Mecca and thought about that great book, The Philadelphia Negro, the very first sociological study. In the Mecca, it could be its own, the Chicago Negro. I teach the documentary poem, so I've been kind of looking for those kind of cues of the elements that suggest a portrait of some sort of kind of art that leans more towards the political and the socioeconomic, and tells that story. And it really occurred to me listening. You can find online a wonderful recording of Gwendolyn Brooks being interviewed by Studs Terkel in early 1970s, both of them reading passages in the Mecca. And because I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, it occurred to me that In the Mecca could be its own This American Life episode if someone were to read it. I'm down. I'm down. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna read a poem that's been with me for a long time, and my talk is going to feel vaguely like reader response meets part new criticism. 1. The Chicago Picasso, August 15th, 1967. Mayor Daley tugged a white ribbon, losing the blue percale wrap. A hearty cheer went up as the covering slipped off the big still sculpture that looks at once like a bird and a woman. Chicago Sun-Times. Seiji Ozawa leads the symphony. The mayor smiles, and 50,000 see. Does man love art? Man visits art, but squirms. Art hurts. Art urges voyages, and it is easier to stay at home, the nice beer ready. In common rooms, we belch or sniff or scratch. Are raw, but we must cook ourselves and style ourselves for art. Who is a requiring courtesan? We squirm. We do not hug the Mona Lisa. We may touch or tolerate an astounding fountain, or a horse and rider, at most another lion. Observe the tall code of a flower, which is as innocent and as guilty, as meaningful and as meaningless as any other flower in the western field. Art hurts, art urges voyages, and it is easier to stay at home. I've uttered these lines many times walking along the crowded sidewalks of some of my favorite cities, facing the throng of bodies passing in the opposite direction, that clatter of humanity. And I have uttered these words too in many museums as I stared down some canvas or sculpture that challenged my assumption about our existence, or assaulted all measures of what I had erroneously believed to be art, or thought suitable for imaginative exploration, testing notions of decency, but always rendered me more reflective, more self-possessed, such that caught up in the turning over and over the implications and importances, I was actually hugging myself, honoring that part in me. The cultivation of that inwardness is what I treasured most in the poetry of Gwendolyn Brooks. She lent us her ears, that's the gift, and instructed us in hearing the interior of a Black woman thinking, roaming over her subjects. I say she lent us her ears because a poem is an oral container of rhythm and time as it is lived in a certain age and carried forth from previous generations. Not only a continuum of consciousness, but a lush note in an ongoing human song. Just as one feels the spirit of the Jazz Age and Langston Hughes, or the aggregate humanity of life in the factories and hum of machines, the industry and businesses of late 19th century in the poems of Walt Whitman, I hear 1940s and 1950s America in Gwen Brooks's poems. And in the Mecca, the sound of 1960s comes blaring through, black, raw, ready, the noise of the whirlwind. I've long been curious in the abstract of this phenomena, how a poet can achieve a sound, one that is emblematic of her interiority, one that is all her own, her breathing, her walk, her vernacular existence, yet also grafted from the idioms of speech and language of her age. No one sounds like Gwendolyn Brooks. That is her achievement. Every artist wants their unique sound. Listen to this, how sharp her compositional ear. And Mrs. Sally, all innocent of saints and signatures, nods and consents, and content to endorse lords as incense and a vintage. Speaks to Prophet Williams, young beyond St. Julia, and rich with Bibles, pimples pout, who reeks with lust for his disciple, is an engine of candid, still, hugging combustibles. His wife, she was a skeleton. His wife, she was a bone. Ida died in self-defense. Kinswomen, Ida died alone. Evie mentioned yesterday her penchants. Indeed, in this passage, we have a good deal of her moves, the internal rhymes, the alliteration, the excesses of meter, here the ghost of pentameter, then the sudden breaking into ballad, interrupted by that exclamatory cry. So at the center of language, even without the sonic cues, the echoes are there. Look at how signature carries all of the letters of saints inside that word, or almost with endorses and lords, how that echoes itself right there. With any passage in this book, and me and my friends, we actually do this, we could play a parlor game of closing our eyes and name that poet by reading any page of Brooks's and would instantly know her notes. Listen to the gems she has lodged into our ears over the years. 1, I had to kick their law into their teeth in order to save them. 2, enamoradas with an approbation, bestowed his title, blessed his inclination. 3, who are full, sleek, tender-clad, fit-ish aglow, all sweetly abortive, hinting at fat fruit, judge it high time that 50ish fingers felt beneath the lovelier plains of enterprise, to resurrect, to moisten with milky chill, to be a random hitching post or plush, to be, for wet eyes, random and handy him. Their guild is giving money to the poor, the worthy poor, the very, very worthy and beautiful poor. 4, each body has its art, its precious prescribed pose. 5, you are the beautiful half of a golden hurt. 6, a girl gets sick of a rose. 7, Maud went to college. Sadie stayed at home. Sadie scraped life with a... There you go. As indicated yesterday, her style wasn't owed truly to a radical breaking like that which occurred with her contemporaries Robert Lowell, also born in 1917, or Adrienne Rich, 12 years her junior, but an evolutionary process that begun most likely with some of her earliest efforts as a young girl penning her verse all the way up to her last writings. The greatest achievement of any poet is to inscribe their voice, to write with such force as to mark language and pull out its inner magic, the properties of sound and the ancient meanings of words so as to reorder our thinking. And this takes a lifetime of progressions and regressions, of experimenting and writing poem after poem after poem. This goes beyond purifying the tongue of the tribe. When we talk about the technology of speech that is poetry, this is what we mean. It's a ritual performance that is spiritual and exalted. Can we not hear the dispossession and joy she must have felt writing these words? Build with life love, with love like lion eyes, with love like morning rise, with love like black, our black, luminously indiscreet, complete, continuous. I find the conversation around Brooks's political and social import definitely stimulating, relevant in our times, which also is the hallmark of greatness. We can keep coming back. But as a practitioner of the art, I gravitate and privilege her aesthetic agenda and vision to unearth where she's at there. I was digging hard yesterday. Margot's urging us to rehear the delicate in Brooks's work as a new way of understanding, quote, Black woman strength. We can also codify and track her sound to understand the psychic gains and withdrawals. In the Mecca, as her hinge book, I'm advocating that we direct our gaze to the inner workings of the poems themselves. I guess I'm going with Baraka on this one, how she sounds, her particular grasp. Baraka says you have to start and finish with the voice, her own voice, how she sounds.
He hunts me up the coffee for my cup. Oh, how I love that Lord. And Mrs. Sally, all innocent of saints and signatures, nods and consents, content to endorse the Lord as an incense and a vintage, speaks to Prophet Williams, young beyond St. Julia, and rich with Bible whose pout, who reeks with lust for his disciple, is an engine of candid steel hugging combustibles. His wife, she was a skeleton. His wife, she was a bone. Ida died in self-defense. Kinswomen, Ida died alone.
Thank you.
Good morning. I am so honored to be included in this amazing conference and so happy to be here in what feels like old home week with people who I love so much and have known for so long. I want to start out reading a couple of passages from the poem in the Mecca. Now, the way of the Mecca was on this wise. I love the way that poem starts out with that single line on the page so that Brooks sets up immediately that we're going to think about both this was the way that life was lived, but also this was the wisdom to be found there. Or in other words, here is what people in the Mecca be knowing, and here is how people be living. Okay, and so then the other thing that I wanted to read is, before we get that break of the all caps that was talked about so eloquently yesterday in the panels, and I want to add on to that today, so I wanted you to hear the passage. Mrs. Sally evokes and loves and loathes a pink-lit image of the toy child, her ladies. Her lady's pink convulsion, toy child dances in stiff, wide pink through Mrs. Sally. Stiff pink is on toy child's poverty of cream, under a shiny tinted warp of gold. What shiny tinted gold is an obad for toy child's head? Has ribbons, too. Ribbons. Not Woolworth cotton comedy, not rubber band, not string. And that would be my baby, and I would be my lady, I my lady. What else is there to say but everything? Suddenly, Counting noses, Mrs. Sally sees no Pepita. Where Pepita be? Where Pepita be? Attar, amphibrac, and present absence. According to a CNN report, in 2014, the Black and Missing Foundation reported that 64,000 Black women and girls were missing nationwide. As I read headlines about missing Black girls, as I read names, Shania, Diana, Demetria, Phoenix, I am drawn again to Brooks and in the Mecca, to the way Brooks poses a question both ontological and epistemological. Where Pepita be? It is not mere in its vernacular. Miss Gwendolyn is never mere in her vernacular. Brooks could have chosen the preposition, where Pepita at, and not the verb, where Pepita be. The question means to disrupt. Where can, does, and must a Black girl exist? Where can, does, and must the existence of a Black girl call into question the existence of another? We heard yesterday in a tremendous presentation the lyrical end of Brooks's They Call It Bronzeville. Back home, the stranger wonders to himself. He shakes his head, he holds his chin. He plans to tell his friends where he has been. I have been, he has been in a place where people live. Besides the meter, iambic pentameter, back home the stranger wonders to himself. He shakes his hand, he holds his chin, he plans, taken up and then disrupted. Other details struck me. The specific locating of the stranger, quote, back home. The motion and touch of particular body parts, shaking of the stranger's head as if to shake off reverie. Holding of the chin as a gesture of pondering, but also a reassurance of one's physical presence or materiality. The fact of the stranger's, quote, plan to architect a locating narrative for his community, to tell his friends where he has been, and where and how the stranger's aphasia disrupts that plan. I have been. The stranger has momentarily existed. The fact of it is a wonder. It is that fact that must be reiterated before moving on to location. He has been. Only then does Brooks locate him again in a place where people live, juxtaposing via capitalization the capital S stranger with capital P people. People live and live nevertheless. That is an urgent imperative, one Brooks gives us in the second sermon on the Warpland. Notice the distinction. He has been, whereas people live. And it is living people that make a place of habitation. Nowhere is this more vividly illustrated than in the Mecca. Suddenly counting noses, Mrs. Sally. Brooks's move to all caps in that passage serves as a visual cue to a moment of heightened presence. Thrown into relief by the visible absence of her child, suddenly, that is, changing angle or character all at once, Mrs. Sally. Made herself, she is. Snatched from her reverie of the, quote, toy child, Mrs. Sally is there, actively there, counting noses. She is at a changed angle, suddenly, doing, counting noses, and being Mrs. Sally. Whenever I read space-making Black poets like Gwendolyn Brooks, I am compelled by what I think of as that do be of Black life they illustrate, a rhythm and a music to live and be. The all-caps line, suddenly counting noses, Mrs. Sally, comes as the answer to a question, the previous line, What else is there to say but everything? Suddenly counting noses, Mrs. Sally begins the else and everything that exists to be said. And here I hear June Jordan, even tonight, in Poem About My Rights. I am not wrong, wrong is not my name. My name is my own, my own, my own. And here I hear Miss Lucille in Won't You Celebrate With Me. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? In the Mecca, what else is there to say but everything? The else is the necessity for a different manner or place or time, the necessity for an additional manner or place or time. The else is the if not space, the otherwise space, an emergent space of being pulled into herself against the warp of gold, dancing through her to its own tune. And that would be my baby, and I would be my lady, my lady. Black art gives us that doobie-doobie-doo, a counter-spelling rhythm and tune against the warpland's warp song, against its literal and metaphorical sirens, pink-lit convulsions that say, want shiny tinted gold, want the toy child. Suddenly, counting noses, Mrs. Sally. Moving means and meaning moves. In the else and everything of her changed angle, her having been pulled into rather than out of her character, Mrs. Sally turns in her panic to find the central feature of each child's face, the often racialized feature of the nose. Imagine her there, counting. Cap's nose, Casey's nose, Emmett's nose, Melody Mary's nose, Briggs's nose, Tennessee's nose, Yvonne's nose, Thomas Earl's nose. Suddenly, counting noses, Mrs. Sally sees no Pepita. Where Pepita be? No Pepita is the specter of her daughter's absence, the seen unseen. Where Pepita be is the sentence immediately calling for her daughter's existence in the very face of her absence. When we first encounter her, S. Smith is Mrs. Sally, hies home to Mecca, hies to marvelous rest. Brooks names her thrice in one line, as though to fix the else and everything of Sally Smith's identity, even as Mrs. Sally hies or striving hastens towards a substanceless home. If we return to the stranger of they call it Bronzeville, back home the stranger wonders to himself. He shakes his head, he holds his chin, he plans to tell his friends where he has been, while the strangers back home may be taken for granted. The Mecca is a recollection, as Alfred the poet sees it, a material collapse that is construction. Sees no Pepita. Where Pepita be? Each sentence emerges from the collapse of the material. To this hot estrangement, quote from the poem, death may come at any time. Mazzola has never known Pepita S, but knows the strangest thing is when the stretcher goes. The elegant hucksters bearing the body when the body leaves its late lair the last time leaves, period. With no plans for return, period. I like to note in that passage Brooks' choice of amphibrax, that is the metrical foot of unstressed, stressed, unstressed, so associated with black girls' names as to be able to use any amphibrachic name as a stand-in for black girl. Little pumpkin seed, little bit of corn oil, Pepita, Mazzola. Juxtaposed against the stranger's plans to tell his friends where he has been, we find Mazzola, witness to the body that leaves with no plans for return, and no need to tell Mazzola what she already been knowing. At the end of the strophe, when we first encounter her, Mrs. Sally is twice described as an attar. An attar is a fragrant, essential oil made from rose petals. I'd love, if I had time, also to do an intertextual close reading of In the Mecca with Muslim Sufi poet Farid al-Din Attar's The Conference of Birds, relating it to Miss Sally's description as a partridge and Pepita's as a robin, but today is not that day. We learn in that same strophe, however, of Mrs. Sally's plans. She plans to set severity apart, to unclench the heavy folly of the fist. The gesture always stops me when I read it, especially in the context of the second sermon on the war plan, where Brooks commands, "Nevertheless live, conduct your blooming in the noise and whip of the whirlwind." She plans to set severity apart, to unclench the heavy folly of the fist. Everyone, clench your fist as tightly as you can. Now look at your fist and open it. To unclench one's fist is a physical gesture of blooming. Where Pepita be? I touch, she said once, petals of a rose. A silky feeling through me goes. Her mother will try for roses. Thank you.